my name is Blair Koo, and today I'd like to talk about living your life as a game. When I was 5 years old, I was a serious game addict. One time my family had a visit to our neighborhood, and I told my mom that I would go home early because I had a serious stomach ache. After a few minutes, my mother, who was worried about her daughter, also decided to come home early. And when she arrived at home, she caught me playing computer games with the happiest face in the world. Yeah, I lied to my mom because I wanted to play a dress-up game. Oh, after this, my mother banned me from playing computer games, and without her, I would not be here in SMU right now. From this experience, I pondered a lot about what makes games so fascinating and thrilling compared to our real lives, and found out two factors that makes game more attractive. Next slide, please. First, the efforts that we put into games are more instantly paid off compared to our real lives. Second, the games contain stories and adventures that we cannot afford ourselves to be bored. So what I decided to do is combine these two advantages of games to my real life. The first thing I did was to schedule time as if I were playing a game. I set up some quests that I have to achieve, and when I finished them, I gave myself points. And when my points reached a certain amount, I was able to get rewards. This time planning method made me easier to be motivated since I didn't have to wait until my efforts eventually paid off in the future. And this technique was also very good for group management. By allotting works collectively and endowing points for accomplished ones, the group efficiency improved dramatically because group members shared enjoyable competition, and so I applied this method to group studies or various other group activities that I did in my high school, and it was very successful. But for individual time management, I found out one big side effect that I did not notice at first. The first financial reward was very effective. However, as time went by, I found an easier shortcut that I can take. If I gave myself easier tasks, I could earn points faster. And after a few weeks of this vicious cycle, I became broke. Next slide, please. So, although financial reward was effective at first, I had to come up with a new breakthrough. And the second way was to change my ways of perception. I'm sure that all of you are familiar with this quote that we are the authors of our own life. But are we? Hardly can we escape from other external factors like others' expectations and even our careers. So it seems that stories made up of our own free will seem sometimes impossible. But if you think your life as a game, the problem is solved. It's natural that games contain some rules and restrictions that a player must obey. However, playing games, if you are a player of a game, you can turn that efforts into your future growth. So what I decided to do is when I make a to-do list, I imagine the unwanted studies as a nutrition for my future growth and my level up. And when I decided to look at my burdens like that, I realized that sometimes just by changing your perception, you can achieve and be a better person. So sometimes it is natural that you have things that you do not want to do, but just by changing your perceptions, you can make your life as a game. And the most important thing is that I play games for my own happiness. And thank you. This is the end of my TED Talk speech. And there are two discussion questions that I prepared. The first is, do you have an effective method to manage your time? How did you come up with that method, and what are advantages of it? So, are there anyone who wants to share their opinions? It can be just a normal way. Yeah. For me,